Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this month's webinar from Rising Tide Leadership Development. Today, we're going to be talking about eliminating procrastination. And I'm not going to lie, I actually have been procrastinating putting this together because, well, there were just some things I didn't want to do. I'm not going to lie. So we'll talk about some of that as we get going today. And so we're going to go ahead and take a look at what is procrastination, what are some common signs for it, and how do we overcome those things. And really, it's the idea of it's the gap between what we intend to do and when we take action on that. That's really what procrastination is. So let's go ahead and keep going on this. It says now is the new later, right? So we've all probably been guilty of saying, I'll get to that later, I'll get to that at some point, or I'll get to that tomorrow. But really, we're all guilty of procrastination in some sense to some degree. And really all procrastination is delaying, postponing, or avoiding doing some type of task, or even doing other tasks instead of what we need to be doing. There's some things that we just don't want to do, and there's some things that, they just might seem overwhelming and daunting, so we don't want to put in the effort to get started on that. But let's talk about how we can overcome some of those things when it comes to the idea of procrastination. It is helpful to know that procrastination can look like laziness, but sometimes it's not just a person being lazy, they are actually just putting something off. And sometimes we can favor being entertained instead of getting work done, or we can favor getting extra rest time done and being in lazy mode because of maybe we did put in an extra effort somewhere. And other times it can just be that, yeah, we choose to do other things. Maybe they're more enjoyable. Maybe we know that it won't take as long. Maybe it's just not, something that we look forward to doing. So we go find other things to take place of that. So again, let's jump in. Let's look at some common reasons for procrastination and how to overcome those things to get the job done. So according to research, they say that about 20% of the population is considered true chronic procrastinators. That means 1 in 5 people is a chronic procrastinator, and I'd say that's probably a bit of an issue. These chronic procrastinators, 1 in 5 people, tend to suffer things like broken marriages, lost jobs, deflated dreams, financial disarray, and self-esteem issues. While these are serious issues, and sometimes putting off a task or one little thing might seem like it's harmless or not that big a deal, it can very easily snowball into some heavier consequences. What's more, a lot of us have had issues with or have issues with how well we deal with money or budget or things like that. But it's a little different with money, because with money, once we spend it, obviously we can earn more and get more back. But with time, once we spend time or utilize time, we don't get that back. So once we waste time in procrastinating, we don't ever get to go back and say, oh, well, I'll just use that again, or I'll get some more of that back. It's lost forever. So procrastinating really does lose something that we can't get back at any point. So how do we overcome those things? Well, first, let's look at some telltale signs of procrastination. There's a lot of them, but here's just a few. If a person has difficulty coping with change or transitions, they might be a chronic procrastinator. A person that is lost whenever they don't have a map to where they're going. That could be literally, or just a plan to make things happen. If a person is chronically late, they might be a procrastinator because always waiting to the last minute to get things done. If to-do lists are never ending and continually growing, that might be a sign of a chronic procrastinator. Or if a person tends to focus on non-essential work or non-essential tasks over high priority tasks, that can be a sign that a person is a chronic procrastinator. So what does that lead to? That leads to the challenge of overcoming the procrastination, right? And this can be a difficult thing for a variety of reasons. So let's take a look at some common reasons and or excuses that people often give for putting things off or for procrastinating. First, we've got the plague of perfectionism. The fear of making mistakes is real and can cause people to put off important obligations for another day. So perfectionism may seem like a good quality because it's often the idea that I've got really high standards, but really what perfectionism is, it's not attainable. It's so high that nobody can ever realistically reach these standards, and so it puts a lot of pressure on a person for themselves. I often say that excellence is a better pursuit than perfection because excellence allows for mistakes, whereas perfection doesn't. And those who claim to be perfectionists, I understand what they're saying, but in reality, none of us are perfect at anything. And a lot of times it's got to do with our view of mistakes, right? Our failures, a scar that we wear with us for the rest of our lives, or are they stepping stones? And so perfectionism often includes either a positive or negative outlook on what failure is. And so that can lead to people procrastinating because they are perfectionists, right? So that's number one, plague of perfectionism. Another common reason is fear. This can often lead to procrastination for a multitude of reasons. It can often be the fear of failure, like we were talking about with the perfectionism, where people don't want to make mistakes because they're afraid that that's going to stay with them forever, and that's how people are going to see them. Or it could also be a fear of success, where if I am successful and I do accomplish this thing, how much more are people going to expect out of me? Or also, what about that idea of if I'm successful, how am I going to grow to continue to accommodate that success? Who else am I going to have to bring into this thing, or who else am I going to have to rely on? And so sometimes we procrastinate because we don't know what that growth is going to look like or what it will be at that level. And so the fear of success can cause us to delay or procrastinate doing things simply because we don't know what it will be at that level. We don't know what it will entail to continue to uphold that level of success and to continue to grow into more success. So for a lot of people, fear is very deeply ingrained and can cause procrastinations for a variety of reasons, which range from, like we said, fear of failure, not being able to do something, or fear of success, where we're not maybe able to sustain that level of excellence or that level of success, right? So the first two we've talked about so far, perfectionism and fear. Both of those have multiple aspects to them. The third one would be lack of motivation. Motivation is often related to expectations. A lot of times procrastinators think they must be fully motivated to begin a task, and or people think they need to have motivation to get started with a task. And a lot of times that motivation is not there at the beginning, right? And a lot of times it'll come down to, when it comes to motivation, it comes more down to discipline than it does the motivation aspect. Because to be honest, for any endeavor, whether that's getting healthier and getting more active, or growing a business, or whatever it is, when we are disciplined in taking the action first, the motivation will be there, right? How many people do you know that have started on a health and fitness journey? And I go to this, of course, because I've been a personal trainer in my past, that they say, I just wasn't motivated this morning. I just couldn't get the motivation to get to the gym. As opposed to those people who say, you know what, I really wasn't motivated this morning, but I'm glad I came because once I got here, I had a really good workout, helped me start my day right, or helped me finish my day in a good way. So a lot of people look at motivation as the key to getting going, whereas it's actually the opposite. If we focus on the discipline of our actions, the actions will lead to motivation. And so it's a kind of a shift in mindset as well. So that is the third one. So we've talked about perfectionism being a cause or a reason to procrastinate, fear of any sort, and then a lack of motivation. These are three common reasons and or excuses that people use as to why they will procrastinate and won't move on things right away. So along with that, we've got lack of interest. I think all of us can admit that we're guilty of delaying, avoiding the tasks that are unappealing to us or we don't really enjoy doing. No matter the job, though, there's always going to be things that we don't necessarily enjoy, but they are necessary to getting to the big picture, right? If we all just avoided the things we didn't like, hardly anything would get accomplished because those things help keep things moving forward. This can be a variety of things. It could be cleaning up. It could be doing paperwork. There's just, again, every job, no matter what it is, has something that we don't necessarily enjoy doing, but it needs to be done. And so sometimes we tend to gravitate towards the things that we enjoy doing and put off the things that we don't enjoy doing. And that can lead to a plethora of issues as well, simply because those things are still important, even though they might not be the most fun. So this is number 4, lack of interest. So we've talked about perfectionism is an excuse for procrastination, fear in many forms, lack of motivation and how that can lead to lack of action, and then lack of interest in specific activities or specific areas of tasks within the job. And then finally, distractions, which can get the best of anybody, right? And we live in such a notification, bell ringing, buzzing, get to my phone first type of society that this has become a bigger and bigger issue for a lot of people. And so whether it's your phone or the internet or people talking around you at work, everywhere we go, there's distractions. So it's really easy to give into those. What about how many of you have on your smartphone or on your phone in general an app that you go to that does just waste time, right? I mean, again, I'll be honest. I have those. I've had to delete multiple games that were mindless games that spent hours on that just helped me to procrastinate and kept me from getting started on the things that I needed to get started on. So that is one thing that our society in general really has an issue with, is just distractions, because every few minutes, for some people every few seconds, that little buzz or that little ding or that little ring is going off, and we can feel it. Even if we don't hear it, we feel the buzz and we know that something's going on, and it just gets the best of our attention, that we want to know, who is it, who's messaging me, or what just came through, or whatever it was, right? Who liked my last picture on social media. So distractions are a huge issue that can lead to procrastination, because we're always drawn to that new thing, right? What just came through, who just liked my picture, who just messaged me, whatever it is, right? So that's the 5th big example of things that can get the best of us, that can lead to distractions, the 5th biggest excuse, if you will. So real quick, one more time, we talked about perfectionism and trying to have unreasonably high standards, and how that can lead to putting things off. Fear of failure, fear of success, and a lot of things in between. Fear of what might happen, fear of the unknown, right? So there's a lot of things in that fear aspect that can hold us back from moving forward on a task or a project. The lack of motivation, like I said, a lot of us fall in that belief that motivation is what really gets us going, but really motivation will be the more disciplined we are. So we'll talk more about that. And along with lack of motivation, lack of interest. So some things that need to get done that just aren't that appealing, that aren't that sexy, if you will, but they're the mundane things that nobody really wants to do, or maybe it's in my job description and somebody else could do it better, but they're busy. So just the lack of wanting to do the little things. And then finally, distractions, like we just talked about, and how distracted we really are in today's society. So with those 5 examples of things that we use as excuses to procrastinate, to put things off until a later date or until tomorrow. Let's talk about what that looks like to overcome those things. And it really comes down to a change of mindset. What happens for a lot of people is we fall into one of two mindsets, which Carol Dweck talks about in her book, Mindset. So what she breaks it down to is two different mindsets. One is called the fixed mindset, which basically says, I have what I have, and that's all I'm ever going to have. So a fixed mindset focuses on what we're capable of already, but it doesn't allow for any type of improvement or new knowledge to really to come in. It's just, these are the skills that I have. This is what I was given naturally. This is all I can work with. On the other side, we really want to try to move more towards the growth mindset. And most people tend to fall into one of these two in general. But the growth mindset basically says, here's where I'm at now, but I can grow to the things that I need to grow myself, to grow my business, to grow my family, to grow in relationships, right? It's saying that I can learn new skills, I can develop other skills to help me get to where I want to get to. And if we get stuck in this fixed mindset, a lot of times we just kind of throw our hands up and we say, this is where we're at. I'm not going to get any better. I'm not going to get any stronger in this. So I'm just going to continue with what I have, right? And here's the other thing. Even though we tend to fall into one of the two mindsets, often, depending on the situation or the project, we can fall from one to the other or flip from one to the other. So if we can maintain and consciously go towards that growth mindset, it will help us to overcome these excuses of being procrastinators, right? So let's dive into some ways to overcome these excuses. So number one, face the fear. So again, before we talked about the fear of failure, and on the other end of the spectrum, the fear of success, and all the areas in between, right? So how do we take that fear head on? Because here's the thing, like, we weren't made to be fearful creatures, but that doesn't mean that there aren't things to be fearful of in our world. So in facing the fear, whatever it is that you might be fearing, maybe it's success, maybe it's failure, maybe it's, am I enough, right? Whatever those questions are, here's some other things to ask when you're feeling fear, to help identify it and also to move past it, to move forward in spite of it, right? So a few questions. What am I afraid of? What is the worst possible consequence that could happen? What could happen if I ignore the situation? Why am I putting this off? What will I gain in the long run by putting this off? Am I trying to convince myself of something that is not true? Am I scared of the process or the result? Can I handle the outcome? Am I trying to protect myself from a certain outcome? Am I actually scared, or was I just told this was scary? And so as we look at these questions and find the answers to them, then we can start to identify what it is that we're scared of, and we can move on it. And maybe the answers will help us realize it's really not that scary. We were just under the impression that it should be scary. So my faith is very important to me. And one thing that I hold on to, one of my favorite verses in the Bible, comes from 2 Timothy 1:7. And it says, for God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. And so when we are facing fears and we remind ourselves of what God has given us, and to know that He is with us, this also helps us to move forward, no matter how big or how small that fear or the project or the action step might be. So just as a reminder. So action step number one, face the fear, overcoming procrastination. Number two, list it out. So we've talked about the to-do list, and for all my list makers out there, I'm sure this one just makes you kind of giddy and excited and happy. And that's great. Those people that list things out and get that little endorphin rush when you check those things off your list, that's great. But I'm going to actually take this a step further and say it's not so important that we just list things out, but in that list, we also need to prioritize it. So here's why priority lists are better than just overall to-do lists, because we start to get into what's called the 80-20 rule, or often called the Pareto principle, which basically says if I put 80% of my effort in the top 20% of my priorities, that is going to give me 80% of my output, which means if I focus on the top priorities on my to-do list, then I'm going to get a lot more output as opposed to just working on those things that are simple or lower in priority, right? So if I focus on the lower priorities first, I tend to add to what I get done or my productivity. Whereas I focus on my top 20%, the higher priorities, then I tend to multiply what I'm capable of getting done. So listing it out, prioritizing, and having this in front of you will really help you start to make progress and gain momentum. And this includes, putting dates to these things and breaking them down. And we'll talk a little bit more about how to break these things down as we go along in these examples. So we've talked about, one, face your fear, finding out what is it that is actually causing your fear, and two, prioritize and list out what it is that you have to get done. Next, take baby steps. So the idea of baby steps is we're getting little things accomplished and we start to build momentum. So how does this work with the prioritizing? Well, sometimes when we prioritize and we have these things out in front of us and we have the high priority things that maybe are a month or 2 or 3 out in front of us, and we start to break down what those look like, it's the baby steps towards those big projects that really help us build momentum. So doing those little things can really help you move forward. And again, it's that building of momentum, because momentum is a very powerful thing when it comes to productivity and efficiency. It's like, I always like to use the example of a train, right? A train that's going 55 miles an hour can blow through just about anything. But a train that's just trying to get started, something as small as a single block can stop that because it's wedged underneath the front wheel, right? So if there's no momentum versus a lot of momentum, we can overcome a lot more with momentum, and these baby steps will help grow that, right? So review. As we talk about overcoming procrastination, number one, we have to face our fear, make certain or clarify what it is that we're fearful of, identify it, list out and prioritize the things that need to be done, and then start taking baby steps towards those big projects, right? So now that we've prioritized, we can break them down into smaller, smart goals as far as like setting a time to each particular step, and identifying what it is that has to be done in each step to make it to the bigger steps and to the bigger aspects of each project. Next, as we've talked about these before, we need to remove distractions. So whatever that looks like for you, whatever thing that takes up your time when you should be doing something else, or whatever you fill your time with, it isn't as important as what you should be doing, we need to get rid of those things. And sometimes that could be, deleting games off of your phone or other apps that take up a lot of your time, putting the phone on silent or even airplane mode so that you can get things done, and maybe having just those blocks of time where you completely remove the distractions of the notifications and are able to really focus on what it is that you need to get done at that particular time. Maybe it's just a matter of which social media you get rid of, or which social media you silence while you're at work, or whatever that is, whatever it looks like for you. Remove the distractions that cause you the most harm, that cause you utilize the majority of your time so that you can put more time towards the important things. Again, the book of Proverbs in chapter 4, verse 25 says, "Let your eyes look straight ahead and your gaze be focused forward." And the Proverbs give us a lot of real life wisdom that we can apply that is helpful in many different aspects, whether that's family or finances, or in this case, focus. It helps us to continue to move forward, right? So again, let's just look back on some of the things we've already talked about when it comes to overcoming excuses to eliminate procrastination. Number one, face your fear and clarify what it is. Prioritize the steps that need to be taken. Take baby steps within those priorities so that you're continuing to build momentum. And then remove distractions, which sometimes is easy, sometimes can be a little more difficult because we are so drawn to those particular aspects. Next, we want to tackle the hard stuff first. So, a lot of people will identify which part of their day is most productive for them. Some people it's first thing in the morning. For some people it's middle of the afternoon. For some people their focus is best in the evening. So whenever your focus is best and you can really put ideas together, focus on those high priority things at that time. I suggest when you're fresh and you're waking up to tackle some of the bigger things on your list that might not be a high priority, but maybe they are a little more intensive or a little harder for you to do because they aren't that interesting. But moving forward and utilizing that time when you have good energy, but maybe your focus is a little bit better at a different part of the day, tackle those hard things first, right? So again, as we start to wrap up here, number one, face your fear. Number two, list out and prioritize what it is that needs to be done. Utilize those projects and categorize them into baby steps so that you're gaining momentum. Remove those distractions and identify when your energy is best to tackle the hard stuff first. The 2 minute rule. This is basically a psychological trick to do on yourself. So the idea is we can do anything for a short amount of time. And so for those things that maybe they just aren't as interesting or a little mundane, a little more boring, if you will, just think of it as I just need to go do this for 2 minutes, for 120 seconds. If I can just get this started, what you're going to find is the getting started is often the hard part. Once you get started, often you're going to find that you can continue through working on that particular project or task because you've taken that big step of starting it. So utilizing the 2 minute rule is just a simple way to really get yourself going into the right direction to get some of the more mundane things done. And like I said, once you're going in those 2 minutes and you're thinking of, you know what, I've got 2 minutes, I'm going to work on what I can while I've got these 2 minutes, you're going to find that those 2 minutes are up. You're probably 5-10 minutes in and you're getting things done. So use the 2 minute rule with the approach that I'm only going to work on this for a couple minutes. And once we do, we're going to find that we're getting a lot more things done. And again, it's going to add to that momentum that you have already built up. And then we're going to talk about holding yourself accountable. And this is a big one. So for us list makers and prioritizers, one way to hold yourself accountable is to have that list always in front of you with dates and times that each task needs to be done. Maybe it's per day, maybe it's per week, maybe it's per month, whatever that looks like for you. And checking them off is that accountability to yourself. Now, to take this a step further, you can have somebody else hold you accountable. And maybe this is somebody that you work with. Maybe this is somebody that is also trying to work at overcoming procrastination, right? So maybe you can work together to move forward, to be more productive, to be less of a procrastinator, and to overcome things like the fears and things that have been excuses in the past. Maybe it is that you give each other cell phones while you're in a certain time block because you work together. Whatever that looks like, find accountability so that the procrastination is lessened and you will find more motivation to continue to work because now you know that you have to share it with somebody. So here this is our last of the action steps, right? So we talked about face your fear, identify what it is, list and prioritize what your projects are and what your tasks are. Take baby steps on those tasks, make them into smaller achievable increments. Maybe that's an hourly thing a day or a daily thing, but break it down so that those baby steps lead into the bigger priorities. Remove distractions, right? Getting rid of the phone for a little bit, or shutting certain notifications off, or whatever that looks like. getting rid of those distractions and removing them out of your way. Tackle the hard stuff first, right? Doing the things that you don't necessarily like to do, but maybe a little more time intensive or physically intensive. Do those when you have the best energy, and then tackle the things that need your mindset when you have more focus. The 2-minute rule. Approach each task that isn't as fun with the idea that I can do this for 120 seconds. I can do this for 2 minutes. If I just put 2 minutes towards it, I'm going to find that once I got started, now I'm at the point where I just want to get it accomplished, right? And that first step is usually the hardest step. And then finally, hold yourself accountable. So whether that's personal accountability with your list of to-dos and tasks, and or accountability with another person, an accountability partner, find some way to be accountable. So now that we've talked about excuses that people use to procrastinate and action steps that we can take to overcome the procrastination, now you've got some things that you can use, and I want you to go ahead and start using that now. It's really easy to come up with the reasons why today or right now is not the right time, right? Whatever it is. It's just not the right time to start and or finish this particular project. I've said a lot of these to myself, and a lot of these seem to ring true for people that are looking for an excuse to get out of things, right? I'm too busy, or I'm too broke, or I'm just too stressed right now. It's too risky to try that. And it's too uncertain. I'm too inexperienced. I'm too old. I'm too young. It's just too disruptive to my life. It's super easy to find excuses, but what I want to help you do is find action steps to move forward and get results. Now, I will say this, sometimes those excuses are valid, but a lot of times they really are just empty excuses because we're finding a way to get out of things, right? So we've identified 5 common excuses that lead to procrastination, but we've also presented today 7 action steps to overcome those excuses for procrastination. So with that in mind, let's put this into action really quick. So if you're listening to this, whether live or the recording, here's what I want you to do. I'm going to invite you right now to think of one thing that you've been putting off, either a task or a project that you need to start, or maybe even a conversation that needs to be had. And I want you to write it down in the comments. And I'm also going to ask you to say one thing you're going to do. Maybe it's one of the 7 things that we talked about of how you're going to get started. It doesn't have to be how it's going to be completed, but what's the one step you're going to take to getting started on that task or whatever it is. So go ahead and do that. As I said earlier, I was a little bit of a procrastinator in putting this together because I was too busy, right? I had too many things going on. Whatever it was, I made excuses, and I put it off and I put it off and I put it off. And then I felt rushed, right? So here we are in the middle of it. And again, a lot of us fall into these in different areas. So what is the one thing that you're needing to do, the task, and what's the one step you're going to take just to get it started? Not even talking about getting it to completion yet, but just to get it started, right? So I appreciate you sharing that with us. And so now that we can start to overcome our procrastination, now we can start to accomplish more. Like I said, we build momentum. We start to be more efficient. And that momentum really starts to build up and multiply our capabilities, not just add to it. And as we said at the beginning, sometimes procrastination can be confused with laziness, but a lot of times being lazy has nothing to do with why we put things off. It's more just the idea that we make excuses because we maybe allow our emotional state to influence our motivations. But I want you to remember that actions can also influence our emotions. So stop overthinking how much needs to be done and simply start on these things. Allow yourself to take breaks if needed, and keep in mind why tasks X, Y, and Z need to be completed to accomplish your goals. Where do they fall in your priorities? And start to move on those things. And I just really encourage you to be a person of action and not just ideas, right? So with that and with sharing, I just want to say the more you take action on these 7 things that we talked about today, the more success is going to be within your reach. The more you're going to accomplish, the more you're going to see your day to day become more of a discipline and less of a procrastination. So I hope that you've taken at least one thing from this that can help you overcome your excuses and your reasons for procrastinating and help you be more of a productive, satisfied, and momentum building individual. And so with that, I just want to say thank you for coming. If you have any questions, I'm always here. Please feel free to direct message me via Facebook. If you have any other topics you'd love to talk about, let me know. If you'd like to see or hear more about what does it look like to have a leadership coach or a leadership training for you or for your team, let's get that conversation going. Just send me a message. You can email me at elijah@coachelijah.com. But really, the best way to reach me is through Facebook. So I appreciate it. Have a great day. And hopefully that your procrastination will start to go down. Have a good one.